Welcome to this week's news from Lanzarote, and don't forget to stay tuned until the very end when I will share with you 3 things that are happening on the island in the next 7 days or so that you might be interested in doing either this year or next year. Now, the first piece of news for you is all about the weather. We had a very, very heavy kalima on Monday. For those of you who don't know, a kalima is when the winds blow in such a way that it brings sand from the Sahara Desert, which is only 70 odd nautical miles from here, across the islands, and they sort of get covered in a thick blanket of sandy, dusty cloud. That happened on Monday, and what always happens after a kalima is that it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and by Monday afternoon temperatures were in the high 30s and it was really, really quite uncomfortable. The weather authority, AEMET, had told us to expect electrical storms and some rain on Monday night. And quite often at the end of a kalima, we do get some rain, but that didn't happen. It did happen the following day on Tuesday, and we had some quite heavy rain in the centre part of the island. It was much lighter the northern end of the island, which is where we live, but it was enough to tickle the gardens along and save me doing some watering for a day or so. Very, very rare for us to have rain in Lanzarote in August, and I actually went back through our weather records, which we've been keeping since 2008, and the last time I recorded any rain in August was back in 2019. Now, the EU announced this week that the EES, which is the entry-exit system into and out of the Schengen zone, will become operational from the 10th of November, so that's not very far away now. For Lanzarote, we have a bit of an issue here currently with passport control, because non-EU visitors are having to have their passports stamped in and out. And we simply don't have enough staff to cope with that at the moment, although some have been drafted in the last week or so from Madrid. The EES hopefully will improve things in that the stamping will no longer have to happen. Essentially, your first visit, if you're from outside of the European Union, your first visit to any Schengen country after the 10th of November may take a little longer, because you'll need to have your photograph taken and to have your fingerprints scanned. Once that's done and you're in the system, everything should move much more smoothly. So you will literally, on entering any Schengen zone country, be able to scan your passport. It will recognise that you're in the system, the gates will open, and you'll go through. And the same will apply when you're leaving. You'll scan your passport and away you go. So in the medium term, this should improve things. In the short term, it may be a little bit more difficult for Lanzarote, because we're very unique in that not only are we busy all year round, so we will still be busy in November when most places' tourist seasons have ended, but we also have an inordinately high ratio of non-EU to EU visitors. We have just over 50% of our visitors are from the UK, which is no longer in the EU. So we have a big throughput of people who need that EES service or the passport stamping service. Anyway, hopefully that will get better in the future. The ETIAS, which is something completely different, and that is the visa waiver scheme, will come into force in May, and we'll tell you a lot more about that as soon as the website opens up and you can apply for your Schengen visa waiver. Now, we had news that the LZ2 was re-tarmacked overnight. That's the main road that runs through Playa and past the airport, and I've read that both lanes are open in both directions in one place, and I've heard from somewhere else that there's 2 lanes in one direction and 1 in the other. I'm actually driving down to Puerto Calero when I've finished filming this, so I'll know the answer by then, but unfortunately it's not early enough for me to confirm it. But we've had months of contraflows and lane changes and stuff going on there, because they're building an underpass to join the 2 halves of Playa Honda. I'll update that next week on where we are with it, but anyway, it should be much better than it has been, and but stay alert for now while the works go on. But in the very near future, for sure, all 4 lanes will be open, and that will be back to normal, and they'll just continue the work on the underpass underneath where we're all driving. And actually, talking about that area, the airport, the Cabildo announced today that they're investing some money in improving the entrance and exit of the airport. So the road system won't change, but if you can picture it in your heads, it's a little bit messy. There's way too many airport staff cars parked on the sort of verges and the side of the road. The gardens are a bit untidy, the pecans a bit messy. So that's all being tidied up. But there is also, they've commissioned a new wind toy. One of the designs Cesar Manrique did before he died. They're going to have it built from the original design and drawings, and that will be placed there at Cesar Manrique Airport appropriately. Now, a big deal was made this week about E. coli at Los Pocillos Beach, and Los Pocillos Beach was indeed closed on Monday because of the presence of E. coli bacteria. It sounds like a scary story when you just hear that, but what happens here is that every beach on the island has its water tested every single day, and it's tested for the presence of harmful algae, which we have had in the past in particularly hot periods, and for any bacteria that could be harmful to people. Now, E. coli grows in the gut of people as well as in animals, so it could have come from anywhere, but E. coli was detected, the beach was duly closed, and it was reopened a couple of days later when it tested clear. So there's nothing to worry about, and the testing system works very well here, and instances of people getting sick from the presence of bacteria or algae are very rare because it's monitored extremely closely. Now's the time to remind you, please, if you haven't already subscribed to this weekly news video from Lanzarote, please do so. Just hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and we'd be very grateful for a like if you enjoy what we're doing. It helps us just to grow our audience, which we are endeavouring to do over the next year or so. And we really value every single one of you who watches this video, and you give up your time, and I'm very much aware of that, so thank you very much. And finally, please leave a comment if you've got a question or something you want to give us feedback on. I read every single comment that's posted below these videos, and if there's a question in there, I will always reply. So thank you once again for watching. Now, I mentioned last week that Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez was visiting the island, and he is staying in the former King's House, La Moreta, in Costa Teguise. The family kept themselves to themselves for a few days, probably chilling into the Lanzarote vibe. A funny story really attached to this, because they were here last year at the same time. And I was gutted because they came to visit Aria Market on Saturday morning last year, and I was out at the time. And if I'd known, I could have gone in and, at least said Buenos dias to Don Pedro, or perhaps have got a photograph of him and his family up there. But I wasn't here and I didn't. I figured lightning couldn't strike twice. Well, it did. The family came up to Aria Market again last Saturday, and once again I was in Arrecife, so I completely missed them. So all my colleagues at the newspapers got great pictures of them looking very relaxed and wandering around the stalls at Aria Market, and I once again missed it, so apologies. Bit of a scary story that goes back to last Monday, and 7 tourists had to be rescued from Pedalos or off Playa Grande in Puerto del Carmen. And the currents and the waves were quite big on Monday, and they just got a bit too far offshore, and then the wind picked up and they were blown along the coast in the direction of the old town and on towards Puerto Calero. They didn't end up in Puerto Calero. The lifeguards picked it up relatively quickly, and a Zodiac was sent out, and the 7 people were taken off the Pedalos and put ashore at the pier at Playa Chica. I imagine it was probably a pretty scary time for them. The system worked well, and they were completely fine, and the Pedalos were towed back to shore by the boat. But it must have been scary for them, so a happy ending to that one. We have some good news this week that exports from the Canary Islands rose by 24% in the first half of 2024. Now, I think a lot of people think that all we do in the Canary Islands is tourism and all our income comes from there, but that isn't the case. It is largely the case here in Lanzarote, but when you take the Canaries as a whole, there's quite a bit of other stuff that goes on. We export a lot of fruit, tomatoes, bananas, pineapples. We also export a lot of cut flowers, and Gran Canaria and Tenerife now have budding oil refineries that crude oil is brought into them from other countries. They refine it into lighter oil products, and then they're shipped out. That market has been very, very strong lately, and Gran Canaria now, via the port at Las Palmas, has a very effective ship refurbishing and oil rig refurbishing operation going on. So the economy is doing really well here, not just in terms of tourism, but in other areas as well. So that's the news for this week, and I promised to talk about 3 things you could do next week if you were here on the island, or indeed that you might want to do at some future date when you're on the island. And all I do is scan through our what's on pages and think about, well, what would I be doing if I was in Lanzarote next week? And I'm lucky enough to know that I'm here anyway. And the first one I'm going to talk about is one of the unsung heroes of the island, and this is the little market at Costa Teguise. Not the massive one at Teguise on a Sunday, but Costa Teguise has a small market in Pueblo Marinero, which is the little square in the centre of town, and it takes place every Wednesday and Friday evening. And I mention it because a lot of people forget about it, and it is unusual in that it is an evening market, and that it takes place from 6 until 10 on Wednesdays and Fridays in Pueblo Marinero. So well worth a visit if you're into markets and you enjoy that kind of thing. It's a bit more sort of arty and crafty than the sort of trinkets and bits and bobs that you get in Teguise, but again, well worth a visit. Now, noon is noon, N-O-O-N, as in midday, is a series of concerts that take place in Arrecife at noon on Saturdays. And the next one is this Saturday, and it's a string quartet called the Laura Quartet playing. They're completely free to enter. Anyone can go along and enjoy it. What looks interesting about this one is normally you would expect a string quartet to be playing purely classical music, but this particular string quartet plays both classical and modern music, and it sounds quite interesting. And effectively it takes place at noon at 12, hence the name of it. And it all takes place at the Casa de la Cultura, the House of Culture in the Plaza de la Constitución in Arrecife. Now, the other thing you might consider doing next week is going to the cinema. Now, we have a brilliant open-air cinema, the Biosfera in Puerto del Carmen, owned by good friends of ours on the top deck, the rooftop of the Biosfera Centre, and that's a really different experience because you can watch a movie under the stars and be served food and enjoy drinks while you're doing that, with Bluetooth headphones that can play the movies in either Spanish or English. But did you know that the main cinemas on the island also regularly screen original language, in other words, English language films? What you want to look for is the words VO or Versión Original, which means it's in the original language. And there are 2 this week. We always put them in the What's On pages of our website. One of them, I'm going to have to look at this because I don't know It Ends With Us is on at the Arrecife Cinema, and something called Maxine is on at the Playa Honda Cinema. The Arrecife Cinema is in Charco San Ginés, and the Playa Honda one is in Dayland, in the Dayland Shopping Centre. They're only €6 to go and watch a movie, and so if you enjoy going to movies, and they've got all the usual, popcorn and sweets and hot dogs and all that kind of stuff, so it's a traditional cinema experience with a big screen and comfortable seating. So that's something else you could do at any time when you're in Lanzarote. Look for the VO movies. And that's it for this week. Thank you so much once again for watching. We really, really appreciate every view we get. And we'll be here same time next week with the Lanzarote news for you. Bye for now.